Welcome, everyone. My name is Ben Bussey. I'm the head of product management at DreamFactory, and I'm joined today by Todd Appleton, engineering manager, and we're really excited to have today's webinar and welcome everyone today. So let's cover the agenda quickly. So what we're going to cover today, it'll be, we have allocated an hour, but it'll probably be about 45 minutes, leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So we're going to kind of cover three key areas. I'm going to talk a little bit, spend the first 10 minutes or so talking about the new product, DreamFactory Enterprise. What is the product? How does it work? What's it for? The bulk of the time we'll spend today really on the demo and kind of walk through some of the use cases in a good amount of detail. And then, of course, we'll leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So what I'd like to do to begin is set a little bit of context. So hopefully everyone on the call today, or most of you at least, are familiar with DreamFactory, the open source product. So we actually make two different products, and we're going to be talking more today, obviously, about the second product, which is DreamFactory Enterprise. But it's important to understand DreamFactory, the open source technology. And what that is an open source REST API backend for mobile, web, and IoT applications. So DreamFactory, our open source product, has been out for just over 2 years. It's an open source Apache 2 license. You can get it from a bunch of places. You can obviously download it from our website. You can get it from the different marketplaces such as Bitnami. And you can deploy it in a number of ways, right? You can run it on your desktop computer. You can run it on Linux. You can run it on Windows. And you can run it, on a cloud platform such as Amazon.com. Now, what's interesting, though, is the DreamFactory Enterprise product, which is really a separate software distribution, which is really all about managing your DreamFactory instances across the entire development lifecycle. So what we call this is basically a management platform for managing DreamFactory across development, test, and production. This is a separate product. It's a closed source product, but what's nice about it is it's free to start. You can start using it. And the subscription license basically covers the management console itself, as well as all of your instances, the DreamFactory instances that are managed by the product. This is a Linux download, so you can just get it from dreamfactory.com, and we'll obviously show everyone today kind of how that works and how you go about getting it. So a quick recap on the DreamFactory open source product, the REST API backend. So for those of you who haven't tried it, basically what it is in this diagram here, it's the software that is in orange. So you can think of it basically as a REST API backend. It's basically a middleware platform that makes it really, really easy to get and use RESTful interfaces to a bunch of different data sources, such as SQL and NoSQL, things like file storage, and you can also hook it up to any external web service, like a remote web service. So that's how it works. It basically has three kind of key things. It auto-generates APIs for all of these different data sources. It provides very sophisticated scripting and the ability to customize behavior at any of the API endpoints. And then it provides a whole bunch of security controls, including role-based access control to the APIs, authentication, Active Directory integration, OAuth integration, and all of the things that you need to really implement an application on the back end. And that can be anything from a web application that you're building, say with AngularJS. It could be a mobile application that's a native mobile app or an HTML5 mobile application. And it can also be, say, an IoT application. And we really see very diverse usage because REST APIs are so powerful. So in a nutshell, you can think of it as a platform for really eliminating most, if not all, of the very heavy lifting that you tend to do on any application development project, which tends to be typically, over half of the typical time spent building applications. So that's a quick recap of DreamFactory, and hopefully people are using it and have been successful with it. So now we're going to turn to DreamFactory Enterprise. So what is DreamFactory Enterprise? DreamFactory Enterprise is a management platform for managing all of the instances, these instances, back on this slide, across your entire development lifecycle. And by development lifecycle, we mean the development of the applications themselves, the testing and QA of your applications, and then the production deployment of those applications wherever they may reside. So DreamFactory, the open source, is a runtime platform. This is a product that is used to manage all of those runtimes in the domain wherever you're running them across development, test, and production. So the core features, there are a lot of features of the product. Todd is going to demo this today in a bit of detail, but the way that you can think of it is kind of three key areas. There's instance management. So when we call instance is a DreamFactory instance of the runtime, the open source runtime. API limits and API reporting. So instance management is really this ability to manage your instances on shared infrastructure, also known as multi-tenancy. So if you go and get the open source product today, you just install it, and then if you want to spin up another one, you install it on a separate server, and then if you want to install another instance, another server, and so forth. DreamFactory Enterprise lets you run many instances of DreamFactory on the same server stack, so multi-tenant. You could run dozens, hundreds, even thousands if you wanted to on shared infrastructure. It provides a whole management UI and interface as well as a console command line interface for managing your instances, your servers, your databases, your clusters across the board. Provides the user management capability, which we'll dig into. And then a really important thing is the ability to migrate your apps and your services across the lifecycle. So you have development teams and the ability to kind of easily move your application logic, your actually application binaries, as well as the underlying services, i.e. the REST APIs, across development, test, and production. The other areas are really around operational control. So a big area of the product is API limits. So you can actually impose transaction limits on any of the areas of API. So when I say areas, I mean basically the cluster level, which we'll talk about, the instance level, as well as the individual user level. You can impose a maximum number of API calls per time. So only 10,000 API calls per minute or whatever. We'll quickly show you how that works. And then lastly, we integrate or we've added the ELK stack, which is a great open source stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. And we've integrated that technology into the product so that all of the API calls are logged inside of Logstash, auditable, searchable with Elastic. And then Kibana is a nice front-end tool that lets you basically visualize dashboards and reports of all of the API traffic, whether that's coming across aggregately across your cluster, across individual instances, say different production instances. You want to see the aggregate traffic and how that trends over time, as well as kind of drill down into very granular detail, like what endpoints are being hit by which users, by which specific applications, etc. So all of this API traffic is obviously running through the runtime instance, but you want to be able to measure, audit, and understand that really, really well in the context of production deployments, right? So operational control. So the way that you can think about this from kind of an architecture perspective is the thing on the left is DreamFactory Enterprise. So this is a product that consists of the Enterprise console, which is what we're going to be showing today. So this is a user interface. You will log in. You have credentials. You are a system administrator of that product. We're also going to be showing a separate UI called the dashboard, and that is where developers come in and create instances and do their software development. So the Enterprise console encompasses all of the capabilities that I just described, the API limits, the usage reporting, the multi-tenancy management of servers and clusters and instances, as well as an administrative management console for managing both system administrators, so you can have many sysadmins, as well as what we call the instance owners. So that will make more sense when you see the demo. The thing on the right is everything that Enterprise manages. So if you're using DreamFactory today, what you're looking at is the admin console, right? You log in, you're an administrator of that individual instance. So the Enterprise product lets you manage many of those instances, and you can do that across development, test, and production. Now, the cluster, that mechanism is basically a stack of servers, and you can run, a web server, app server, database server, and you can run many instances on those. So you can have as many clusters as you want. You can partition your servers up any way that you want, and then you can run any number of instances on a particular cluster. So that's kind of a high-level overview of the architecture. Now, the benefits, I'll quickly walk through this. The key thing is really, there are a number of things, but I would say the cost reduction is substantial using a product like Enterprise, particularly when you get into the real world of deploying production applications. So the multi-tenancy has a lot of, reduction in infrastructure cost, but really I think where a lot of the significant savings is on operational overhead. So you imagine deploying many applications, the value of a product like this goes up more and more as you add incremental applications. The whole migration process and the number of people that are required to kind of deploy across is reduced significantly with DreamFactory Enterprise. From an operations perspective, the real value is the single API control panel. So everywhere you have, all of the instances that are running out there, you have a single pane of glass to manage all of those instances. And that's everything from the operational security of how many API calls are coming through the system, from reducing potential attacks like denial of service, as well as just having very tight cost controls and understanding, okay, how many API calls are able to come through this particular instance. You can control that very carefully. And then obviously you want to be able to audit and report at the API layer. So the reason we really built this product is we saw a lot of questions and demand from users of the open source product asking about a lot of these features, and it made sense to for customers that are going into real production, especially large implementations, to build a set of functionality on top of the open source product that we've had out for a couple years now. So use cases, I'll just quickly cover this before we hop into the demo. Probably the most common use cases really, and where companies want to pick this type of product up, is the enterprise deployments. So you're an enterprise company, you might be a Fortune 500 company, you could be a smaller company, but in any case, you need to manage multiple instances of DreamFactory across your development, test, and production servers, and you need to govern the use of that open source technology. If you're a design or development agency or systems integrator, we're seeing great interest from those folks that are doing development on behalf of their customers. So they want an environment where they can quickly develop the software, get their APIs up and running, and build in a kind of sandbox environment, show their customers those applications, and then ultimately deploy them. And when they deploy them, they may either run the application just with a standalone single instance of DreamFactory, which is fine. You can migrate that to your production instance without DreamFactory Enterprise. Or, in some cases, the customer may want to actually have Enterprise deployed as well so that they can manage many applications. So it really comes down to how are you going to deploy those applications in production. But if you're a development agency, there's actually a lot of value just in the development phase with DreamFactory Enterprise. And that should be clear in the demo when Todd shows kind of how the dashboard capability works for anyone doing development. And then lastly, any folks, we do a lot of partnerships. So if you're a managed service provider that's providing value-added services on top of cloud infrastructure, you should definitely get in touch with us. The enterprise product, actually, we use it ourselves for our hosted system. So if you've gone and gotten a DreamFactory account on dreamfactory.com, what's running that is the enterprise product. So that's a multi-tenant system, and we have tens of thousands of developers using that on shared infrastructure. So definitely get in touch if you want to talk about that as well. This is a way to provide developer-facing APIs to your customers. So with that, we'll hop over to the demo. Todd will show off the product, and then we'll have hop right back into the slides after to point you to some additional resources, and then we'll wrap up with Q&A. So off to you, Todd.
Thank you, Ben. Let me share my screen here. Can you see my screen, Ben?
Yes, sir.
All right,
yes,
great.
We can.
Hey everyone, my name is Todd Appleton, and as Ben said, I'm managing the engineering team here at DreamFactory. And today we'll be just giving you a quick demo of the enterprise product, just hopefully enough to kind of show you what it's all about and give you the basic idea behind it. There's two main pieces to the product, as Ben mentioned. We have the dashboard. This is kind of the developer experience where you invite or drive developers to the dashboard to sign up. When they sign up, they essentially get an account on the enterprise system that you've set up. And after they have that account, they can then create one or more instances of the DreamFactory open source platform. And then that's where they go to actually build their applications, create services to connect to databases or file storage. It's all the kind of nitty-gritty configuration that's required by the app. People who sign up at the dashboard, we refer to as instance owners. And this means that they are the owner of any instances they create within the context of the account on the enterprise system. So if you have 5 different developers, each of them has their own account on the dashboard and can create as many instances as they like inside that account. And each developer's instances will be only visible to them, not to the other developers. The second piece we'll look at today is the console, and this is more the administrative side of things. When you install DreamFactory Enterprise, you by default set up credentials for your first system administrator user. After that point, you can add as many other system admins as you like. These users, as opposed to instance owners, have the ability to basically manage everything about the entire DreamFactory install. They can manage the servers, the clusters, which we'll talk about a little bit later, the users. They can also specify API limits based on either cluster, instance, or user counts, as well as setting up reports and dashboards using Kibana to actually report on API usage by either by application, by date, really any report that you can create with Kibana you can do straight from the enterprise console. So with that quick intro, let's jump into the dashboard. This is the UI that you see here. If I were a new user, I would just click sign up and then I'd just get a simple registration form. I'm already signed up, so I'll click login. The UI here is pretty straightforward. It's about managing the instances for your dashboard account. So I can easily create a new instance just by going up here and entering a name. It has to be unique. And just like that, down below here, you see that new inst2 showed up. I had an existing instance here already. I can easily launch that just by clicking the launch button. And if you've used DreamFactory before, you'll notice that you're now in the admin console for that single instance. And like I mentioned, this is where you go to do everything related to building your app. You actually define the application itself, get an API key, set up your instance users, roles, services, all that kind of stuff. You also have the ability to delete instances, and you can export and later import instances as well. And this is a key element of the whole development lifecycle that Ben mentioned. Not only can you export single applications and services from within an instance, you can also export entire instances from this UI here and either re-import them into a different cluster on the same system or even a completely different enterprise setup. So it's really flexible as far as having the ability to move your work around and not have to recreate a bunch of stuff when you go to production. So that's really about all there is to the dashboard. It's just a simple UI where developers can come and spin up and manage their DreamFactory instances. If it's a brand new instance, when you click launch, this is actually now creating the database and getting everything set up because I've never run this instance before. And here in a few seconds, you'll see the create first system admin user. And this is a user within this single instance. So when it says system admin, it doesn't mean at the enterprise level. This is an admin for this single instance that I've just launched. And then once I filled out this form and click create, I'd be kicked into the admin console for that second instance. So let's jump over to the console. Like I said earlier, this is sort of the administrative side of things. I can just log in here with an existing system admin user. Right off the bat, we've got just some help information here on the home page. There's a movie here with a good overview of what DreamFactory Enterprise is and how you can use it to build and manage your applications. Basic help resources, support resources, licensing information. As you build out your enterprise system, this will reflect your usage, how many instances you have, how many users you have, how many applications you have. All that information will be available here on this page as you start to build things out. The top level of the enterprise install is really built around the concept of a cluster. A cluster is really just a concept that we've defined. It represents kind of a trifecta of 3 different servers. There's a web server, an app server, and a database server. So if I click on this cluster to look at the details, I can see that I've got one of each of those types of servers defined. And of course, if now I jump over to servers, I'll see that, yes, again, I have all 3 of those. If I want to see the details of one of these, I can click on it and it shows me all the connection information and user credentials, that type of thing for that particular setup. By default, DreamFactory Enterprise will give you a single cluster with the 3 servers. You can really tweak that however you like. You can add additional clusters. You can even have, for example, a database server. Here it's assignable. It could be shared between multiple clusters if you wanted to do that. So we make it really flexible. If you have special requests about what can be done in that area, just contact support and we can help you out. But the basic initial setup is pretty simple. It's just that single cluster. There's 2 different types of users. So the instance owner was the people who signed up using the dashboard. That's typically your developers who are coming to create their instances and then use those instances to build their apps. And then system administrator is people who can log into the console like we've done now. So here you can just see these are the ones I've got on my current setup here. You can easily edit these, just basic form-based editing, do password resets, all that kind of thing. Jumping over to instances, this shows you all of the instances currently created on your enterprise setup. So we've got the single cluster, cluster-test, and then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 instances currently existing on that cluster. Actually, I've only got 2. The first 2 have already been deleted, but they're still there. One powerful capability is the option to define API limits, and this can be done at multiple levels. If I click Create here, I could create a rule, and it could be, okay, for this particular cluster-test, I want to only allow 1,000 calls per minute. So it's like minute for the period, 1,000. As soon as I set it to active and click Create, the platform itself, that instance would start enforcing this limit. So any user or any instance that makes calls will all roll up to this cluster level and be applied towards that limit of 1,000 per minute. Once you hit the limit, you'll get a easy to understand message back from the API. It'll be a 429 error, too many requests, and I believe it even shows you which limits you've actually hit. And at that point, it's just a matter of waiting for the next minute or the next hour or day or whatever your period is for that limit counter to read. There's the option to manually clear these things. So, if you're developing or whatever and get stuck and you need to clear it, you can do that. I do want to point out that all the functionality here is also available from console commands. This makes it really easy to do commands like clearing the limits, but also you can do lots of setup and kind of automate things with scripts if you need to reproduce scenarios easily without having to go through all the steps in the UI. So we kind of took a console first approach and then built the UI on top of that functionality. The Reports tab is really interesting. Basically, by default, you can have DreamFactory install an ELK stack. If you're not familiar with ELK, it's Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. You can think of it as all of the API calls are logged in this tool called Logstash. Any of that data can then be queried by Elasticsearch, and you can use Kibana to then create visualizations and combine those visualizations into dashboards that can then be, included just by pasting a URL onto some other website or wherever you need that dashboard to be available from. If you click the hyperlink here, we've got some information on the wiki. If you do have any questions about the enterprise product in general, I recommend you start here on the wiki. We've got a lot of information. Some of it's TBD and still being improved, but within the next week or two, it should really be fleshed out pretty well. So this just gives you some kind of quick start on how to do visualizations. But let me just show you just so you can see kind of how it works. If I click Launch Kibana, click Visualize, I've got two pre-created charts down here. We'll start with the pie chart. Change the date to last 7 days. So the colors represent the different instances that have made API calls over the last 7 days. And you can see inst1 was that one that I already had pre-existing. So this is just a really simple pie chart that shows the count per instance over the last 7 days. In a similar manner, you can do a little more complex chart. This is a stacked bar chart. It's showing the same information but by date. So for each day, it shows you which instances have made calls and how many. You can obviously configure a lot more details. You could do this by app name. You could even drill down and see what users are making calls. This is sort of the top level of which instances have been making API calls the most. So our goal here is just to provide you an entry point into Kibana, and then you can do whatever you want. We don't want to try to limit you to, some simple canned things when there's a lot more capabilities built into Kibana. So our approach was to let you launch it and then do whatever you need to do. So that's about it for the demo. I mean, it's not a super complex user interface. We tried to keep it simple and very streamlined. As always, we'd love to get feedback. So if you have any suggestions, or definitely if you have any issues, please let us know. So with that, I'll turn things back over to Ben.
Great, thanks, Todd. Okay, one moment. Okay, so what I'd like to do is just wrap up with some additional resources. So Todd, thanks for the demo. I think that hopefully gave everyone at least a basic primer on the product. There's a lot more, obviously, to learn. What I suggest is kind of checking out some of these resources. There's a lot online, so definitely head on over to our website for links to a bunch of things on actually both products. So dreamfactory.com/resources. If you go to the top navigation there on the website, there's a link called resources, and you can click there. A whole bunch of stuff, including some of the links here. So documentation, As Todd mentioned, pretty close, so the enterprise docs are coming together well. DreamFactory 2.0 documentation is almost there. It's in good shape, so please head on over there. Wiki.dreamfactory.com has a lot of really some good examples in there and a lot more sort of low-level technical information as you're learning the technologies. We have a great community forum. If you don't know about that, head on over to community.dreamfactory.com. You can search all sorts of information there. It's getting richer and richer by the day. A lot of good content there to learn from. You can obviously ask questions on there as well. And our support team looks at that all the time, as well as other users who are using the technology and have good experience with it will often chime in and try to answer your questions. Blog.dreamfactory.com. I've got a bunch of good content there, including everything from tutorials to some case studies to just general information about APIs, which we're obviously a big fan of here at DreamFactory. You can download the product at dreamfactory.com. In fact, I'll show you the best way to do that in a moment on the website, but that's the full URL. If you go to /features, you can scroll down and it will link to that URL. Now this is the Linux download instructions. It's pretty straightforward if you know the command line and you're familiar with Linux. It's pretty basic stuff. But anytime if you have questions or you run into any snags, there are a number of ways to get in touch with us. So the quickest is probably to just hit support@dreamfactory.com. We provide free support initially, 14 days, so you can go in there and just ask any questions and we'll help you out. And then if you have questions about like the licensing model, the costs and everything, or you just want just more general information, you can contact dsbsales@dreamfactory.com. And all of these links are obviously available from the website as well. So before we hop into Q&A, I just want to quickly show a couple things. So if you go to, let's hop on over to features here for that link. So this provides a bunch of information. DreamFactory 2.0, if you just want to try it out, the product, just the open source product without installing anything, you can just try our free dev environment. Many of you have probably done that. You can download DreamFactory 2.0 from here as well, and then if you want to go try out Enterprise and just install it, you can just scroll down and hit this link, and you'll just have a little registration form so we know who you are, and then off you go to the instructions to get it. So that's about it. My name again is Ben Bussey. That's my email address, and Todd Appleton as well, who gave a great demo today, toddappleton@dreamfactory.com. So feel free to reach out to us anytime. So I think we're at about 40 after the hour, so plenty of time for Q&A. Any questions come through?
Yeah, hey Ben, we've had a few. So by the way, everyone, while we're answering these questions, if you have a question, please feel free to put it into the questions area of the GoToWebinar interface, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. So one question was, is there a free tier? How does pricing work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me answer that. There is a free tier, and there's a couple ways that you can do this. So what I recommend is heading on over to the website where we just showed, and you can obviously install the product for free. And the model is that we want people to just be able to try it. If you need help, you can contact us, but you can just go and install it for free. And then if you head on over to the subscriptions page here, it provides you some more details. So there is a free tier, like basically we call it free starter. When you go and install it, there are no limitations in terms of functionality. So you can go and use it. It comes ready to go. All of the things that you saw today, including both the dashboard and the console, you can create your accounts and start spinning up instances. For the free starter, we do have limits, but those aren't strictly enforced. So what we do is we have basically what Todd showed there, the license key. We just do simple counts anonymously of your usage, and then if you're going above certain limits, then we'll contact you. But in no way are you limited in terms of trying it out and using it. Now, I should actually mention one more thing, is that we also have development support packages, and this is important because if you end up using the open source product and liking it for your development, and you're kind of interested in Enterprise, but maybe you don't know if you need it yet, what you can do is if you purchase a development support subscription, you basically have unlimited use of DreamFactory Enterprise, which is highlighted here in the bottom. And what that does is it lets you just use it for development. And until you decide that you want to use it for production, you can use it as much as you want. So again, just to be clear, we encourage people to use it, see if it's going to be a good fit for your use cases, and if it is, when you want to use it more and go to production with it, then we can have a discussion about the licensing terms there. Hopefully that's clear.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ben.
Sure.
So another question is question about what about user management and Active Directory integration? Those are really features of DreamFactory itself, though, right?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The Active Directory, so if you think about the security of DreamFactory, there's different levels of security. So the runtime usage, like if you're building an application, right, and you need it to, you need like authentication and maybe authorization with AD, that's going to happen in DreamFactory, the instance level. So the open source product supports AD integration right now. You can go in there and integrate it. Again, Enterprise is really for managing the security across your whole set of instances. So in other words, the AD feature is really, it's a feature that's in the open source product right now. And it's a new feature, so it came out with DreamFactory 2.0, and in fact, we just did some pretty significant enhancements to that, which I encourage you to check out if you go to get it on GitHub or go to bitnami.com/DreamFactory. We're on version 2.02, and 2.02 includes support for both authentication with AD as well as kind of authorization. So there's a utility to basically map your AD groups to DreamFactory roles. So that's a nice feature as well. So short answer, that was a long-winded answer, but the short answer is it's in the open source product, the AD integration.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ben. So question here, do I have to license the Elk Stack software separately?
That's a great question. Sorry we didn't cover that. So Elk Stack, so what is Elk Stack? We showed it separate. Elastic, the company, makes that product. That is an open source product. So a couple things to mention about it. First, we encourage people to get it because it provides really good reporting functionality. You don't have to install it if you don't want. It is open source. It is free. You have the option to get additional functionality from Elasticsearch, like for managing your Elk Stack. Similar to how we have a product for managing DreamFactory, they have a product for managing Elastic, including some additional security features and stuff. That's optional, but you would deal with Elastic directly. We can get you to the right people if you don't have a rep there, but you would talk to them. But you don't have to license anything, so you can use what you saw in the demo today for free because it's an Apache license, Elk Stack.
Great. So a question here about the roadmap on extending documentation. They would like more documentation on building actual real-world applications, creating using custom models, performing operations, to mention a few. So do you have any, I guess that's more of a DreamFactory question again, but do you have any idea on the roadmap on extended documentation?
Yeah, so I can, let me speak quickly about that. If you go to wiki.dreamfactory.com, basically where we are with the docs is we're probably, I don't know, 80% there roughly. I mean, that's an estimate, but pretty well far along. We're wrapping the documentation up for DreamFactory, the open source product, in this sprint, which ends December 20th. So what if you have specific feedback on it, it's like any documentation is going to continue to improve. It's always a work in progress, especially as we release new features. I mean, we release frequently and extend the product quite a bit. So we're going to be very diligent about keeping the documentation up to date. The approach we've taken with the examples is to keep it relatively simple. So there's a whole link called tutorials, which are very short, encapsulated, brief. You can read them in a couple minutes and get the basics of how to use the REST API, how to connect to a SQL database, kind of the nuts and bolts of how to use a technology like DreamFactory. If you're not aware of it, I would say the best starting point is to look at those tutorials just to get a handle on specific use cases. Then in the product, there's a quick start link right under welcome when you're using the product. That has links to a bunch of different, well, an address book sample application for 6 different front-end platforms, including iOS, Android, Angular, Titanium, JavaScript, as well as .NET. Those are really important to read through because they provide hands-on examples of, it's a working application, right? So you can go and install it, run it from GitHub, and build it and then run it. And then you'll see exactly how basic things like CRUD operations work, how authentication works, how you do things like parent-child relationship queries, everything like this. And that's a good way to learn by example. So I would definitely check those things out if you haven't. If you have and you think it's unsatisfactory, you should contact us or hit up the forum. And then if you have general feedback, like on things that we can add to the documentation, just speak up about it. You can contact me or Todd directly on these email addresses here. You can go to the forum and say, hey, does anyone have an example of this? Or just give general feedback and on the docs, and we'll try to do our best to get that out there. One other thing, this is all open source, so if you built something and you think it's worthy of sharing and you think it will help other folks, we'd love to see it. You can do that as a pull request, or you can just hit us directly on the forum or at these email addresses, and we'll integrate any of that work as well.
Great, thanks, Ben. Here's a question. I think it's just a little bit of the confusion between DreamFactory, the open source product, and Enterprise, but someone's asking, is there a difference between the open source free version and the Enterprise edition, and how easy is it to migrate from free to Enterprise? But I think you can explain this better, Ben, but essentially our Enterprise product is an overlay to an additional functionality to the DreamFactory product. But go ahead and take that.
Yeah, that's the way to think about it. So let me try to make this as clear as possible. So what Todd showed there when he created that instance, right, and then he launched it, and then he was in the admin console, functionality is exactly the same in terms of the runtime, the experience and the usage of the product when you're building your applications and all that. The difference is that with DreamFactory Enterprise, when you spawned or created that instance, that is what we call a managed instance, which means that it is being measured with the API calls. You can employ API limits on it. You can, revoke access to that. So in other words, if a developer has a bunch of instances and then you're the sysadmin, you can control those instances. If there are old ones, if that employee leaves a company, you can revoke privileges to access those instances. All of that kind of governance is built into the enterprise product. So it's a different piece of software. It's used to manage the runtime instances of DreamFactory. The only other technical difference from a licensing perspective is that the code itself, the managed instances, are actually not open source. So you license it and then you have access to it, and all of the code generated, including the runtime, is governed by a commercial license. The only other thing to say is that from a feature and roadmap perspective, this question often comes up. So today, if you're running the open source product, there is not a good way to suddenly take control of it with the enterprise product. In the future, we're working on a feature where basically you'll be able to have some instances out there running, and then after they're up and running, you'll be able to basically bring them in to the enterprise product. So just to be clear, when you get enterprise, and managed instances is an instance that you spawn, that you create with it. But functionally, the capabilities of the runtime are exactly the same and will always be on the same version of software.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, I think we have one last question here. Can one DreamFactory Enterprise manage DreamFactory instances across many different servers?
Yes, absolutely. So that's a really good question, and that's really what it's all about. So where you put those servers, if you want to run them on premises, you want to have your production server be in the open cloud on EC2 or whatever, you can do all of that. It's basically a logical mapping of servers. So we're not providing the APIs to set up and create those servers. You need to do that. But once you have a host, a DNS entry for that, then you can put that into Enterprise, and then Enterprise basically says, okay, I know where to deploy this instance. I have the information I need, and where that's running is really up to you. So you can kind of set it up in any kind of heterogeneous way that you want to on different clouds, private, public, hybrid, whatever, or however you want to deploy it. your instances, that is.
Okay, great. All right, I think that does it for today. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is recorded. We did get that question as well, so there will be a recording of this, and we'll get that link out to everybody here hopefully in the next few days. And I want to thank everyone again for joining us, and thanks to Ben and Todd for the great demonstration today.